Hey everyone, as I said in this video right here, I'm going to be going over in detail the full gimbal setup that I used for a fully remote control operation of my A7R5 to capture live performance. Before we get started though, smash that like button to help this video be seen by more people. But with that being said, let's get started. So, the original gimbal setup was built on an Ulanzi 0Y f38 travel tripod, but for this demonstration and for added stability, we're going to be using the YC Onion Panetta Peak as our base. The reason why I would recommend using a separate dedicated tripod instead of the original base that the Ronin comes with is because a dedicated tripod is going to have a larger base, which is going to mean that it's going to be a lot harder to tip over, and that's generally going to be better since you're going to be operating this rig completely remotely. You also don't want to risk your investment tipping over if somebody accidentally bumps into it or anything like that, so again, that's why I'm doing it this way. Once we have the battery grip attached to the tripod with a 1/4-20 screw, we can then pop on the top part of the gimbal. For this demonstration, I'm going to be building this out entirely on the gimbal. Generally though, I would usually separate the Ronin base plate and operate on the camera, build it all out, and then just pop it onto the gimbal when I'm done. But for demonstration purposes, this makes things a little bit easier. For this particular setup, I should also note that you'll need a camera cage with a 1/4-20 thread and RE locating pins on the side. Also, for this setup, since I am using the F38 system, DJI's RS3 is not compatible with that, so I'm going to need to use the long Ronin plate and then attach the F38 base plate to that. So this allows me to simply slide the camera in and lock it. Now I'm adding the most important part of this particular rig, which is going to be the small rig 12 or 15 millimeter rod clamp. This allows us to forgo the annoying Ronin quick release plate, which has a 1/4-20 thread and 2 area locating pins on either side. I find that this plate wiggles a lot since the motor has so much torque. It can actually jostle your camera enough and loosen it, and the 12 millimeter rod will kind of be a little bit offset from where it should be. So just keep that in mind. If you do happen to use the Ronin base plate, you can of course do that, but it's just a little bit less secure, I find, than doing it this way. And to make sure that everything stays nice and tight, I also used included lens support on the front of the base plate. I put the geared ring that they give you on top of my lens. I also have a small rig gear, but it doesn't really work so well, so I put this on top of that, and that kind of gives me a little bit of an extra grip, I find, relative to just putting it on the lens itself, but again, you can sort of do what you want. I also always used the included lens tie with the leather side facing the lens. In my original setup though, I also used a little bit of paracord to tension the 12 millimeter rod to the base plate and then to tension it further to the lens itself. It's really up to you how you want to do this, but just make sure that your lens is not going to be wiggling about and that the focus motor doesn't pull away from the body of the lens, since that can be really catastrophic if you're in the middle of an event and your focus motor stops working. So now we can slot the Raven Eye into the hot shoe mount on the base plate of the tilt motor. For cabling, simply attach the right angle USB cable to the back of the Raven Eye, then connect the other side of the USB-C cable to the bottom slot of the gimbal. Then attach the HDMI that's compatible with your camera to the mini HDMI on the Raven Eye. Finally, for me, I use USB-C cable to connect my camera to the Raven Eye's RSS port. On the camera, simply select PC remote control, then just connect the USB-C cable to your focus motor and plug the other side into the second slot of the Ronin. Now that's all of the cabling done, so all that's left is to balance the gimbal. If you need a little bit more of a detailed explanation on how to actually do this, I made a video that you can watch right here, which will show you everything that you need to know. Then we just calibrate the gimbal, set the focus motor endpoints. For this setup, I really wanted to have remote optical zoom control over my 24-105 lens, so even though the zoom ring has hard stops, I don't recommend doing the automatic endpoint calibration. Since this lens is not geared from the factory, I find that the focus motor easily slips, and so that is definitely something that I wouldn't really recommend doing. So I will be showing you guys how to do a manual setup. To do this, just make sure that the front dial is set to focus control, then go over and slide your finger on the focus dial to the shortest focal length, then select start, then move the dial the other way until you get to the maximum focal length, press end, and now you have the in and out points for the focus motor, so that way it'll stop before it hits any of the hard stops on either side. To actually control the camera from afar, you're going to need to turn on the Raven Eye by double pressing and holding the power button. Then just open the Ronin app on your phone, tap connect to Raven Eye. If it's your first time, then you can use the password on the Raven Eye to connect, and then after that you can set your own password. You may also want to disable Bluetooth since it can interfere with the Wi-Fi signal from the Raven Eye. If you're having connection issues, that can be a really helpful thing to do. Now, all you need to do is just head back to the Ronin app. It should open your camera view. If it doesn't, just tap connect to Raven Eye and then it'll pop right open. Now that you're inside of the app, just set up your gimbal wherever you want it. And then inside of the camera view, you'll have a bunch of options. So if you tap here, you'll get access to gimbal control features that I always like to turn on, one of them being the joystick control. So if we tap here, we can see that a joystick pops up on the bottom left, and we can move the gimbal left, right, up, down, however. You can also adjust any of the settings like smoothness or speed. So I like to keep my smoothness pretty high and speed pretty low, so that way it's not so jarring, since using a joystick on a touchscreen is kind of not so simple and it's not so easy. You don't get that nice feedback that you would from a real controller. Unfortunately, it's kind of annoying that Ronin app lets you use an Xbox controller or a PlayStation controller to control your gimbal, but it only lets you do it inside of the Create tab, not inside of the Raven Eye tab, which is a little bit frustrating. I really would have liked that, but the nice thing is that we do have the option to use gyro control, so if you enable this, wherever you point your phone, the gimbal is going to follow. This is really useful for manual tracking shots, and you can enable active track by drawing a box around a subject on the screen. One thing to note about active track though is that unless your subject is very distinctly separate from the background, it may get confused and lose your subject pretty easily. And to have full focus control, all you need to do is just tap here on the focus control tab in the menu and just press enable. Once you have that enabled, you'll see a little slider on the right hand side. You can slide it up or down to zoom in or zoom out in my case, or change focus from near to far. Finally, you can tap here on the bottom and control your aperture, ISO, and shutter speed. If you're doing movies though, you definitely don't want to be changing your shutter speed, so really for exposure control and depth of field, you just want to play around with aperture and ISO. One thing that I do want to mention about this camera setup is that you need to make sure that your camera is connected by the cable to either the RSS port on the gimbal on the top of the column or on the Raven Eye on the RSS port. DJI also recommends that you use PC remote on Sony cameras. I'm not entirely sure what it is on others, but if you are unsure, go to DJI's support page and check out the setup guide for your particular camera. One thing to be really careful of is to make sure that your camera is not connected to the gimbal's Bluetooth. This will disrupt your ability to control camera settings with the Raven Eye, and that's a little bit frustrating. It doesn't really say anything about that on DJI's support page, so it's something that I had to figure out myself, and it was a little bit frustrating, but now that I know it, it's really easy to set up. And another couple of bonus tips. So if you are using this in a live setting, you may want to lock the RS3 Pro screen when you're done setting it up, so that way no changes get made. Additionally, you can also gaff tape the back screen because it doesn't really turn off, and if you're in a dark environment during a performance or something like that, you don't want to be distracting. So if you gaff tape it and black it out, that would be really good. Another thing is that on your camera, if you have an EVF, you can go into your settings, and on this particular camera, we'll go down into the yellow toolbox icon, we'll go to monitor, and then we'll change it from automatic to EVF. This makes sure that your back screen doesn't turn on and become a nuisance for any of the actors. But with that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed this video and really got a lot out of it. I made this as detailed as I could to show you all of the ins and outs of making a setup like this, and hopefully you guys will be able to use it on your next shoots. If you did like it, definitely leave a comment down below, and if you didn't already, please like the video and subscribe to the channel for more content, and I'll be seeing you guys in the next video. Peace.